Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ryan West. I'm the Deputy Director for Iowa Workforce Development. Thank you for joining us. We got a lot. I think we're going to have to jam pack in here in this hour. So I want to go ahead and get started. Participants were just over 100, it looks like. So joining me today on the call are some folks from banking and the credit union industries, and I'll let them introduce themselves here as we get going. I have them unmuted. Jessica, you should be good to go. Jeff, I have you unmuted as well. Wasn't sure if you wanted to, what time you wanted to jump in. Here's how we'll kind of go. I think I'll kick it off with the 10-minute kind of overview of where we are with stuff. Then I'll pass it over to Jessica with the credit union. And then Jeff, if you want to cover some stuff, feel free as well, if that's okay with everybody. Good. Okay. Good deal. Thanks, Jeff. So I don't have a PowerPoint for everybody today. So if you're seeing some odd things on your screen, that's why. This is the first time I'm doing Zoom on my own. So fingers crossed, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you may have been on some of our webinars before. So thank you for joining us, and if you've been on a previous one to this. So we'll record this and we'll put it back on the website. We have questions that have already come in, and then looks like we have some coming in through the chat. Go ahead and put those through the chat. And then if I can't answer any of the unemployment insurance ones, we'll make sure to get those answered and back out to everybody, or at least put on our frequently asked questions. So I'm going to go ahead and get started high level. So as most of you know at this point, I'm sure, the CARES Act bill that was passed almost 2 weeks ago now, we started to receive guidance late last week to help us as an agency, Iowa Workforce Development. Excuse me. So what happens is when these bills are passed at the federal level for unemployment insurance purposes, then they have to go through the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor then flushes out more of the details and really into the weeds and how we actually make it work. So Iowa, like all the other states, was kind of sitting and waiting for that guidance. And we started to receive it late last Thursday, Friday, and then actually all over this past weekend as well. So we have everything pretty much now to move forward, and we've started that process. So no real secrets that came out of the original bill through the guidance. Let me kind of cover real quick. So first thing is the FPUC, right? So get ready here for acronym heavy stuff, guys, okay? So this is the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, right? So this is that $600 per week, all right? And what they've essentially said was the $600 per week will be allowed for anybody who's basically who has any type of unemployment insurance claim, which is what we kind of thought. And if you're partial, you still would qualify for it. So that question has come up a lot as well. So essentially, if you qualify for unemployment at $400 a week, in theory, you would get an additional $600. That $600 is paid for out of the federal government. So that'll be reimbursed to us. It's not something that comes out of the trust fund and affects you, the employer. So that's a good thing. Now, the other side of it is we are really stressing and at the guidance of the Department of Labor that, we're not going to accept people who want to quit their job or leave their job or whatever from their job to try to get this $600. And so we'll address those accordingly as we come through them. Just remember, as an employer, when that individual files for unemployment insurance, you're going to get the notice of claim. On that notice of claim, you're going to want to put down if the individual, obviously, I'm assuming most of you have probably been in this world before with filling out a notice of claim, but it's just a piece of paper that will come out to you. So you're going to, and that to notify you, hey, your employee, John Smith or Jane Smith, has filed for unemployment. You're going to want to put that part on there. Additionally, if your employer receives a loan under the Paycheck Protection Act, which that'll get covered here later by a different group, I am in no way a paycheck protection expert, and places you back on the payroll full-time, you will no longer be eligible for the unemployment of FPUC benefits. So I know, excuse me, I know this has been a question that's really come up from a lot of the employers, like from a standpoint of, hey, we don't want, our employees are telling us maybe they're going to try to leave to get this money. Well, that's not going to be allowable. And so we want to, that's the first thing we wanted to cover here. Now, for those who are eligible, that obviously that's what it's there for. Okay. just so you know, as employers too, one of the things we're trying to really stress here is, there are plenty of employers, and perhaps you're some of them, who are trying to fill positions. That kind of gets lost in this thing, which is, for all the employers who are kind of dealing with this real hardship, there are employers who are on the other side of it who are trying to fill positions, and so trying to balance that where employees are, if a business is shut down for an extended period, trying to get those folks into other work is something we're trying to push for as well. Okay, so that's the FPUC part. That's the $600, right? The goal we're shooting for is that money would be paid out by starting next Friday. I think that's the 17th. And most of this information came out in a press release that was released yesterday morning. So the other part of it is the PUA, the PUA. So that's the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. What that basically is that's that pot of money that's set up for those individual employers, self-employed, independent contractors, nonprofit employees, gig employers, who are not qualified for a normal unemployment insurance claim because they don't have earned wages. So remember, unemployment's based on what wages you've earned from your employer. And so same thing here. So this fund of money, or this pot of money, excuse me, is set up for that group. I know we had a lot of questions on that. I think I had some questions come in earlier today already on that one as well. But that's ready, or that's being put together now. So our goal there was to ideally, I believe we stated, hope ideally by next Friday, money's going out on that. I think we had 10 days listed actually, so I think that was the 17th. We had something similar. We have something similar to this in place, so we don't have to luckily rebuild it. But remember, when we get all this guidance, we have to then go make it all work. So you're taking this plan, and then you got to go make it essentially work in a fast, quick time period with technology who doesn't always line up with all this stuff. So that part of it, I really want to push everybody, and a lot of these questions we're going to get, I want to push you to our website because we're continually updating this, and I'll get to the website stuff here in a minute. That's where you're going to be able to see what information you need to submit, what's going to be required if you haven't filed your taxes for 2019, which I know that's going to be a lot of people. But that's what that group is for. So PUA is like DUA in a sense. DUA is disaster unemployment assistance. The reason I want to tell you this is because it can kind of get confusing. So PUA took the place of DUA for this pandemic that we're under. And DUA is like when we have a tornado in the state or a flood, or some type of natural disaster, we can have a declaration of disaster unemployment insurance, or DUA, or assistance, excuse me, or DUA as we commonly refer to it. It has to be declared by the president, and it didn't. DUA got passed in the state of Iowa. There's 3 forms of it, but it didn't get passed for the unemployment insurance part. But that got picked up under this PUA. So if you got questions, or you're hearing people say, well, what about DUA as well? Well, that's covered in this one. So you're going to want to find the guidance out there on the website. There is a lot of guidance on this one. We received a lot of detailed information over the weekend that we're combing through and making sure we're correct on. The other one is PEUC, which is the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. Let me say that again. I'm talking way too fast. I apologize. That's PEUC, Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And what this one does is allow up to 13 weeks of unemployment insurance benefits after people have exhausted their benefits. So for you employers, perhaps you were maybe drawing unemployment during the recession. We had EUC in place, so drop the P, and there was several different forms of it. And back then when we were administering that, it was kind of uncharted territory. We hadn't really done it a lot before that, so we learned a lot in that last round. I was here during that time about 10 years ago, and so we have a lot of that in place, the schematics to put it together. And what that basically means is that after you draw out your 26 weeks of unemployment, so if you go on PUA, let's say, right, you're a small business, and by small business, I just mean in theory, you're defined as a small business. You get unemployment, you draw it out for 26 weeks. You would then be eligible for PEUC, which is an additional 13 weeks of unemployment insurance. That one goes till the end of 2020. Will it be extended? You know, who knows? Hopefully, we're well moving on from this in the next several weeks. But again, I'm not at a liberty to really give my expertise on that because I certainly don't know. So those are really the main three. The Paycheck Protection Program, that is not Iowa Workforce Development. There's some confusion on that, but we have the experts on that can handle that. And I'll turn that over to them here in just a few seconds, and then we can go to questions. But one other thing on the FPUC money, so that money is good until, or is accepted, paid out until the week ending July 25th of this year, okay? And it started essentially this past Sunday, March 29th. I'm sorry, last Sunday, 2 weeks ago, which would have been the 29th, if that makes any sense there. So that's kind of the time frame on it. The PUA is good till the end of the year. I believe it's December 26, 2020. So they extended EUC and the PUA out to the end of the year, which makes sense. And then the $600, which is essentially a way to, get money in the community, in the economy. And that's really what unemployment insurance in a nutshell is designed to do. It's designed to help short-term relief in the times of disasters. And so high level, that's where we are. I know there will be questions that come up with that. I see them coming in already. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Jessica. And she's with the Division of Credit Union. And Jessica, I'll let you title and all that. I don't want to screw that up. Thank you for making time, and please, by all means, jump in and kind of cover what you want to. And I can pull up or share a screen if you want me to on that link you sent. Just let me know.
Ryan, can you confirm you can hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Okay, my name is Jessica Pohlmeyer. I'm the attorney and the executive officer for the Iowa Division of Credit Unions. And with me today are Katie Averill, the superintendent of credit unions for the state of Iowa, and Jeff Flagey, the superintendent for banking for the state of Iowa. And the Division of Credit Unions regulates 83 Iowa state chartered credit unions, and the Division of Banking regulates all of the state and community banks as well as additional lenders. And we're here today to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program under the CARES Act administered by the Small Business Administration with input specifically from the U.S. Treasury. Before I move on, Katie or Jeff, would you like to say anything?
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Perfect. Okay, so to start out, I am an attorney, but we are not here to provide legal advice to you. The Iowa Division of Credit Unions and the Iowa Division of Banking are going to provide a basic overview of the PPP program, or Paycheck Protection Program. We are not with the SBA or the Treasury, and therefore we do not have legal authority to interpret what the CARES Act or the interim final rules say. We can only explain the rules as they are written and offer our understanding based on our expertise. We will not provide legal advice, and you are encouraged to do your own due diligence prior to applying for a PPP loan, spending the funds of a PPP loan, or applying for forgiveness. So the Paycheck Protection Program is part of the SBA Section 7A loans. It's an expansion of what already exists. And what specifically was expanded under the PPP program are who can qualify, how much you can borrow, how you can spend those funds, and what forgiveness is available to you. I think on the screen is guidance that our office, the Credit Union Division, drafted for our lenders, but it's publicly available from our website, and you can review it if you find it to be helpful. So specifically for these loans, borrowers include small businesses, 501c3 designated nonprofits, veterans organizations under 501c19, tribal businesses, self-proprietors, and independent contractors. These loans are to help businesses continue to make payroll checks or paycheck protection for their employees to help offset laid off employees or concerns due to cash flow from the individual businesses. There are small business caps, specifically 500 or less employees in a physical location. However, there are exceptions to that. And Those can be found through the SBA website. We can provide some guidance, but this is a high-level overview. Additionally, some affiliation and franchise rules will apply to those borrowers. These loans were available as of April 3rd for everyone other than independent contractors and sole proprietors. It's my understanding that they can apply as of April 10th. The limit for these loans is 2.5 times a business's payroll cost, average monthly payroll cost. Average monthly payroll is determined based on the 2019 calendar year. And essentially, you just add up all of your payroll costs, divide them by 12 to get your average monthly, and then multiply that by the 2.5%. There are exclusions as to what does not constitute payroll. Specifically, anyone who is paid more than $100,000 annually, either as an independent contractor, employee, or sole proprietor. Anything above that $100,000 cap will not count, as well as any sort of employee benefits, qualified sick and family leave, which is credited somewhere else under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and federal employment taxes, which are imposed and withheld between February 15th and June 30th. That's specifically for the employer's share, not the employee's share. The employee's share would still be covered. And any employee who resides outside of the United States would not be covered under this program. Once you have received your funds based on your 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost, or $10 million, whichever is higher, you can use those funds, but only as specified under the CARES Act with information provided by the U.S. Treasury and the SBA. I should note for you that in this particular environment, the rules provided by SBA and Treasury are interim, meaning they are not final. They are effective as if they are final rules now, but they are open for public comment, and they will not actually become final until after that public comment period, which means many of these things could change, and we don't know what those are yet, which is why everything needs to be taken with your own eye towards due diligence. You need to research your own applicability and whether or not you are eligible. Even if you are eligible as a small business, there are some additional exclusions under the interim final rule that should definitely be considered. Once you have received your funds, you can use your PPP distributed loan funds for payroll support, including employee salaries, paid sick and medical leave, insurance premiums, mortgage interest payments on a mortgage that existed before February 15, 2020, rent, utility payments, and interest on other debt obligations. However, at least 75% of the distributed funds must be used for payroll costs. This is in the interim rule. It's not in the CARES Act, but it's very important. 75% must be used for payroll costs, and failure to do that will most likely eliminate the forgiveness opportunity, which we'll talk about next. For PPP loans, you can have the option to get up to the full principal amount of your loan forgiven after 8 weeks. The way this works is after the loan is distributed, 8 weeks following, you calculate the amount that was spent on the usable, the fund approved uses, determine that amount and submit that for application. Your forgiveness is limited to those 8 weeks, and that 75% of payroll costs is still applied. You cannot exceed the principal of the loan for forgiveness. Anything that is remaining after the forgiveness balance has been reduced will be subject to a 1% interest rate and a loan maturity of 2 years. So 1% interest rate and 2 years for repayment. The loan payments themselves are deferred automatically for 6 months, and at the lender's option can be extended for 1 year. There is a limit of 1 PPP loan per eligible borrower. There are no collateral or personal guarantee requirements from the borrowers. The borrowers themselves are required to determine their own eligibility and whether or not the franchise and affiliation rules apply to them, as well as determine their own eligible forgiveness amount. Forgiveness will be reduced based on the reduction in employees that are employed by the borrower and or reduction in pay. However, if you've already laid off employees and then you bring them back after the PPP program goes into effect, you can get your reduction reduced. So you would be able to go back up to an amount of forgiveness that you would have been otherwise eligible for had you not had to lay off those employees. And that's going to be compared to your prior year's employment. So those are the very high level points. All of that is very complicated. It's a complex system. We encourage you to review the interim rule, and we're happy to answer as many questions as we can. These are first come, first served loans, and you will apply directly to your lending institution, a bank, a credit union. There are alternative lending options through SBA, but the PPP loans specifically are going to be through a bank or a credit union or another lending institution. Okay, Ryan, that was a very high level overview, but it was still a lot of information. So we're happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Katie. I'm sorry, thank you, Jessica. Katie, did you have something you want to add? I'm not sure. I think you're unmuted. Sorry. I'll keep working on that. Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just a few comments. So, if you look at the statistics in Iowa, there's about 60,000 small businesses that would fall under the 500 employee rule. So it's a pretty vast field. There's about 270 banks in Iowa. Katie can give you the number of credit unions in Iowa. And so this program, as Jeff said, started last Friday. It got off to a bit of a rough start just because there's so much coming at SBA so fast, and Treasury is involved in making the rules that, so you may be seeing some reports about kind of the rough start, but I just remind everybody that a program of this size and scale is going to take a little time to find its footing. In fact, they approved more loans over the weekend than the entire 7A program approved in 2019. So even though it's been a bit rough, it is off to a start, and they're moving loans through the process. Right now, most of the loans being sent in and approved are just that. They're sent in and approved. They have not been funded yet. And part of that is because we're still waiting for SBA's final rules for closing and funding the loans. It was supposed to come out last night. It has not come out yet. Have not seen it today yet either. But we're hoping within today or tomorrow that those rules will come out, and then those loans that have been already approved can be funded. There's, as was said earlier, there's $349 billion that has been allocated to this program. Congress already started talking today about an additional $200 to $250 million. And so obviously Congress is very committed to try to make this program work for as many small businesses as out there. And the last comment I'd make is the one that Jess ended with. It is absolutely best to start with the financial institution where you bank. It will simplify the process. It will simplify the application because you're already on record with your financial institution. And so start there and then go from there. If your financial institution isn't going to do it, you may need to try to find another option. In some cases, your financial institution is trying to get on board with the program and may just need a few days to get fully set up with SBA. So that would be my comments, Ryan.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sounds like you guys got your hands full for sure. Katie, I'm going to try to make you a host here, and let's see if we can, that'll allow you to talk so we can hear you here. So, geez. Let's see. Okay, Katie, see if that'll help you now. Okay, I don't think we're having any.
In the chat, she said she has nothing to add at this time, Ryan.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's
And then
no problem.
if I could get, we have a few people who have their cameras on. Can you turn your cameras off, please? So let me go in and turn those off, and then I'll go ahead and go into questions. So what I'm going to do then, Katie, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and go into the questions. First of all, Jessica, thank you for that presentation, and Jeff, thank you as well. Let me turn off this camera. Mal, if you're on, if you can go in and shut off cameras for me too. That way we won't see all this background stuff, guys. I apologize. So let me go into the first question here. Actually, I'm just going to. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the first questions. Looks like the first ones we got are for UI for the most part, which is okay. That's primarily what we thought we would get coming in early. So let me go ahead and let me do this. All right, so the first question we got here, our business was a mandatory shutdown back on March 17th. I see now that there is new separation region code for virus for us to select. That was not there when we responded to the bulk of the notifications. I did, but in the comments, it was COVID-19 related shutdown. Essentially, do I need to go back into all 200 responses and change the separation reason code? No, you do not. That was something we got added in after the fact. So you don't need to worry about that. Next question, based on IWD Q&A, claimants are eligible for state unemployment if they fear contracting COVID-19. This means they will also receive the CARES Act $600 a week for unemployment. The result is many workers will now earn more by not working and will severely impact those employers considered as essential infrastructure. Is this impact on essential employers a consideration when confirming or denying UI benefits? So that's not something we can specifically make. It's based off the situation. So as I kind of stated earlier, our agency, along with all unemployment insurance agencies, are following the guidance of the Department of Labor, which is people should not be leaving their jobs to try to claim the extra $600. When you notify us of that, we should address that accordingly and move through those. So that's a good question, but I think we have official guidance that we're making sure that we're following those rules as they're put out, which is we want to keep people in the workforce if at all possible, and we don't want them leaving to try to claim money and not work. For self-employed filers who filed March 28th and submitted their 1099s to the UI Claims Help inbox and reference their claim number and contact information, will you be processing that information or requiring them to submit this information again? I do not believe so, no. That information should all be in there. Let me get back to you on that one. The other part of it is, are you taking annual earnings, divided this by 4 to calculate the highest quarter earnings? I believe so. We're working through that guidance now. We had a real big reference sheet come out to us over the weekend specifically on that one. That's in reference to that PUA section, which are those employers who are going to qualify under them circumstances where they're self-employed. So first part I'll check. On the second part, I believe you are correct. I don't know how we're calculating the tax, the return, a tax return schedule C. That information will be out on the website. So all of these individual separate buckets, so the FPOC, the PUA, they're all going to have their individual page on our iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov. And so those should be up this week, if not by the end of today. So I really would encourage everybody to go out there and check those, because that will allow you to really get more in-depth information so that we can keep that stuff going, and so you can see what the latest and greatest are on that. So we're working through that. We should have those questions, the answers to those questions out there today. How does reduction of hours of salary rather than a complete layoff affect the unemployment calculation? How does it affect the $600? So technically they would be eligible for the $600 per week. Reduction in staff, or reduction in hours simply means that we use a formula. And so after $100 of earned wages in the week, it's a dollar for dollar reduction. So let's say you're making $250 hypothetically. Most likely, assuming you qualified under the normal regular circumstances, you would probably get roughly $225 in unemployment insurance, give or take. So that's how it affects it. It cuts it basically in half. Anybody that's working through the week and claiming unemployment insurance, they're on a partial layoff. The most important thing for those individuals is that they report their wages when they do their weekly claim on Sunday. I'm curious if anything is changing with the CARES Act or otherwise during the COVID-19 timeframe as it relates to unemployment eligibility for student employees who work on campus in connection with their enrollment as a student. In some cases, positions in laboratories, et cetera, are not available due to COVID-19. Yeah, normally under unemployment is not covered employment for employment purposes. Yeah, that's changed. So if they have covered wages, they should file. One of the questions that has come up a lot are for those individuals who work in education. For those of you who don't know, teachers are not technically eligible to claim unemployment during the summer hours, how they're set up, but that's kind of been removed as we're in this kind of unusual period. So I would suggest they just file for the claim. Most likely they would qualify under one of the packages that are out there. I have one employee currently on his second week of unemployment. We have a total of 9 employees. We have more employees wanting to take layoff now due to receiving the additional $600. Does everyone who claims unemployment due to COVID-19 get the additional $600? Well, if they're qualified, they would. Again, though, we don't want people to leave just to try to get the $600. So that's kind of a two-part answer. Yes, I believe the guidance is written that if you're essentially getting any partial unemployment payment, you would be eligible for the $600. However, again, we're not encouraging people to do that. Jessica, this one's for you also. Do you know if we are applying to the paycheck? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Also, do you know if we are applying for the Paycheck Protection Program, if we would need to hire the employee who is on the unemployment back in order to qualify for that?
I don't know that the restriction or the reduction in forgiveness requires you to hire the exact employee back, but in order to prevent your forgiveness amount from being reduced due to a reduction in your workforce, you would need to bring someone back on to make sure that you meet the no more than 25% reduction amount.
Okay.
Whether it has to be the same employee, I do not know.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Next question. I am helping out with nonprofit that elected to pay claims as they were submitted rather than be insured. I understand that that their account will not be charged for a period of time. Can you tell me how long will the exemption continue? All of the organization's recent layoffs have been a result of being shut down due to COVID-19. Is there any possibility that those who opted out to pay back in an earlier than January 1, 2021? This is a really long question. So let me start with the first part. How long will that exemption continue? So these folks would continue under the PUA situation or bucket of money, and that goes till the end of the year. All of the organization recent layoffs have been a result of being shut down due to COVID-19. Is there any possibility that those who opted out can opt back in earlier than 20? I'm not sure I'm following that question all the way. So what I'll do here is I will get a better response to this one, and we'll get the answer back out there today. So good question. It's a longer one. I want to make sure I have all the right answers on it. So those were the questions that came in before. Now let me read the questions that have come in now. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here, guys. Let me go to my phone here and I'll pull these up. Okay, so our business was on a mandatory shutdown back on March 17. I see now there is a new, okay, I already read that one, sorry. We're that one, that one, that one. Number 8, I'll get back to. If schools are continuing to pay all hourly employees through April 30th, what paperwork do we need to IWD to stop employees from making unemployment claims? Yeah, so when you get that notice of claim, you just need to send that in to us. If you haven't done that already, I'm assuming maybe you have. That will, and on that notice of claim, just write on there the situation that you guys are in on that. And if you have further questions on that, let us know. But that's the first step, so we know that you're still paying these. And the employees, in theory, should be reporting those wages on their unemployment insurance claim when they claim their weekly claim as well. Does a person on partial unemployment who is working minimal hours still get the $600 weekly kicker? Yeah, they will. Again, though, what their regular unemployment insurance will be is based on what their hourly wages are per week. Does a person have to, does a person have to have earned a minimum of $2,500 in the previous 18 months to be eligible for COVID-related unemployment? So essentially, for a normal unemployment insurance claim, we look at the last 18 months. That's what we call the base period. And in that 18 months, we break it up by quarters. And so you have to have at least 2 quarters of qualifying wages. One quarter has to be at least $1,660, and the other quarter has to be I believe, $830. Where you get that $2,500, whatever that 830 plus the 1660 gets you the 2,500. I don't remember that off the top of my head, but that's what would qualify you for a normal regular unemployment insurance claim. And that would be most likely for the minimum amount, assuming everything went through, which is $87 a week. If you don't have those wages, there are other qualifying ways, one of them being through PUA, which again is designed for anybody who is self-employed and or does not have qualifying wages in any other outlet. So I would suggest that individual file to see where the ball drops, so to speak. Good question. Potentially, yes, they would still qualify in other areas. And, it's really up to getting the claim on the system to determine that. Do you qualify for the extra $600 if you're in the VSW program, which is our voluntary shared work program? You do. If everybody got a copy of that press release that went out on Monday, it's out on our website, iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov, if you haven't seen that. But the $600 is essentially for anybody who is under filing a really unemployment insurance claim under the sun, for lack of a better term. So VSW or voluntary shared work would be there. Now, one thing to remember, I think we have it worded in the press release as STC, or short-term compensation. We call it voluntary shared work here in the state of Iowa. It's the same thing, though. Okay, next question. If an employee is terminated for performance, applies for unemployment, will they qualify for FPUC or $600? So, you can get unemployment if you're terminated. You can get unemployment if you quit. Every scenario is different. I would suggest that you and the employer just need to protest that, which I'm assuming you are. If they are qualified for the unemployment insurance, then in theory, yes, they would get it. However, it would have to go through a fact-finding interview. Remember, quits and discharges automatically should generate a fact-finding interview, which would have to be completed. And then, of course, it can go to appeals from there. But in theory, that's open to interpretation based on what the outcome of the actual fact-finding would be, or if the employer doesn't protest or participate on the fact-finding. You got a lot of variables in there. But if they would qualify, if they would, so let's say the employer protests, they have a fact-finding, and the employer doesn't win on that side, right? Then yes, the employee would get the $600. If a county has to close due to COVID-19, if employees go to unemployment, will the county be charged back for the claims at 100%, 50% of her conflicting information? Yeah, so or government entities is at 50%. And that information should be out on the website now. That's a good question. It is confusing. There's a lot of conflicting information out there. But reimbursables fall in that ballpark. I don't have the exact verbiage off the top of my head on that, but it is listed out on the website. And if it's not, I'll check when we're done here and I'll make sure that it's out there. But and the guidance we received last week, I believe that was at 50%. If the 500 employee threshold under the, okay, here's one for you, Jessica and or team. If the 500 is the $500 employee, I'm sorry, is the 500 employee threshold under the PPP based on 2020 employee count or 2019 employee count? Is it based on actively at work employees, or do you include furlough employees in that count?
I believe that it's based on the 2020 count, but it will be compared to the 2019 count to determine whether a reduction in forgiveness is going to be applied. And it depends regarding furloughed as to whether or not they're still being paid. If they're not being paid, then they're not going to count. But if they are being paid, they may still count.
Okay, good deal. If someone owns more than one business, can each business apply for the Paycheck Protection Program?
Yes, I believe it's based on business, not necessarily based on owner, unless it's a solely owned or wholly owned. There are ownership rule caps set forth in the interim rule and in the guidance. So I would encourage you to go check to make sure that you are not violating that. But as long as you're not outside of those caps, multiple businesses should be able to apply.
Okay.
And the only thing I would add to that is to check the affiliate rules.
The affiliate rule.
For somebody, yeah, that may prevent a double up depending on the ownership percentage.
As well as the franchise rules.
Correct.
Okay, good deal. Next question, does the $600 per week CARES supplement apply to part-time reductions? We had some information that employees would get $300. That does not change at $600 for all of them. There's no reduction in that. I mean, it's a good question. I know that part-time one's kind of been a little confusing. Okay, here's one for you guys as well. Owners of partnerships and limited liability companies sometimes compensate themselves through profits distributions rather than salary. Are such distributions payroll costs for purposes of determining the maximum loan amount and the amount of the loan that may be forgiven? And I can read that again if you need me.
So,
the interim rule, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Jess, and I'll fill in.
The interim rule sets out what payroll costs consist of, specifically salary, wages, commissions, or similar compensation, including cash tips or the equivalent. So my interpretation is that it's a little bit unclear, but I would think no. Jeff, what is your interpretation of that?
I think if you could really produce bank records, you may have a shot at it, but I think Jess is right. I think it's going to be, you really have to be able to prove up payroll rules. And so if you look at that and over a period of a year of what your average payroll is, I'm not quite sure how that's all going to tie into what would be considered approved payroll. So I think it's going to be a hard sell.
Okay, next one here is, looks like we have, do employers who enter into voluntary shared work agreement have to reimburse for UI payments made by the state? We understand under S.2108 they do not. We are reimbursable. Yeah, so if you're under the voluntary shared work program, which we're encouraging employers to take part in, if it fits what you're doing, then those are paid by the feds. Yeah, and that information, I believe, has been updated out on the website. So you are correct in your question. You do not have to. Let's see here. Next one. If an employer is advised to self-isolate because of medical conditions, are they eligible for unemployment? They are. We are reading conflicting answers. We have work available, but the doctor has written them off. Yeah, so if they have a doctor, essentially if they have a doctor's note, they're going to be covered. I think this is the best way to put it. You know, obviously every scenario is unique. I know I sound like a broken record when I say that, you guys, but you know, I gotta, just so I'm you know, not getting too detailed into each situation. That's something obviously you'd probably need to address with the employee, but from a standpoint of an employee has been eligible based on a doctor's advice, and yeah, they would qualify. Which section of the 1040 tax return do we include with the PUA? So I don't know that right off the top of my head. That's a very good question. That'll be out on the website if it's not already today under the PUA tab. So go out and check that. If you don't mind, I don't want to give you bad information on that. Very good question. For workers who have been reduced under voluntary shared work agreement are getting 50% of wages from their employer. Are those wages taken into account when they reduce UIWBA under the current rules? I don't know if, are those wages taken into account when they reduce the UIWBA under the current rules? No, I don't believe so. I'm going to come back to that one. Let me get a better answer on that one. That's a good question as well. Under the voluntary shared work program, we understand you have to reduce those hours for all those in a work unit by the same percentage or same percent. Do you have to reduce all in a worker unit, or can some be kept in full-time? What is a work unit? Again, that's going to be out on our website. I don't need to, again, sound like a broken record, but there's a lot of voluntary shared work information. I really want to direct everybody out to that on our website so you can get see that information. We've had some of these questions come up before. So go out there and see if you can find your answers. And I will do the same as soon as we get off the call. I'm making notes as we go. If an owner officer making over $100,000 a year goes half furlough, is he or she paid unemployment as if he were earning $100,000? Will there be back pay for the additional $600? Okay, so owner officers, if they're reporting wages on themselves under the letter of the law, you can file for unemployment insurance. And we consider furlough and layoff as the same thing for unemployment insurance purposes. So that's the first part. Is he or she unemployed as if they were earning $100,000? So really, it's based on your wages. So to answer that question, when you file your claim, you would get a monetary statement that tells you what you're going to be qualified for. So we have a cap. So I believe it's about $10,000 a quarter. So if you have 2 quarters of earned wages at $10,000 a piece, most likely, don't quote me here, give or take, you're going to qualify for the maximum claim. The maximum claim in the state of Iowa is $591 per week. That's with 4 dependents. So in Iowa, you can claim up to 4 dependents. So yeah, it's certainly possible you would qualify for a full unemployment insurance claim. By half furlough, if you're going to drop the part-time, then you would want to report your wages. And it's possible they would negate what you could earn for unemployment during the week. So a couple different ways you can look at that one. Will there be back pay for the additional $600? There will not be back pay. Starts when you get your claim filed, and it started as of March 29th. So for instance, if you file your claim today, your claim would be effective this previous Sunday. That's when it would start. There was an earlier webinar comment suggesting employers under PPP may not be exempt from UI benefit charges. Can you clarify, please? Was that you, Jessica, or was that you? Forgive me.
I'm not sure. I'll clarify it from my end, and then you can clarify it from your end if it needs more. So what I said is when determining your payroll costs to determine your monthly average, which then determines your total amount that you can borrow, qualified sick and family leave wages for which a credit is allowed under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act will not qualify as payroll costs. And I believe that's the only comment that I made. And then I'll kick it back to you, Ryan.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I read something that was in a press release that may be part of it too. So it was additionally, if your employer receives a loan under the Paycheck Protection Act and places you back on the payroll. So this is that from a claimant's point of view, all right? So let me start that over. Additionally, if your employer receives a loan under the Paycheck Protection Act and places you back on the payroll full-time, you will no longer be eligible for unemployment or FPOC benefits, which is that additional $600. So I'm wondering if that's where it came from too. I hope that answers that one. If an employee or a large employer needs to work a reduced schedule to care for children affected by school closures, does this unemployed qualify for unemployment? Yes, they do. Just to clarify, when staff applies for unemployment, they file their claim at the end of the unemployment week. Yeah, so you're going to file your initial claim. So a claim's good for 1 year. So let's say you file your initial claim today or your new claim, right? Same thing. You then would have to claim a weekly claim every weekend, all right? And we want people to do that on Sunday. So Sunday, you're claiming for the week that just happened, Monday through Saturday. So this Sunday, when you claim your week, it would be for this week that we're in right now. And it's the wages that you earned throughout the week. So that's a good question. Again, it's not as, sometimes it can be made out to be more confusing than it needs to be, but that's how it's really set up in every state. Now, some states run week to week a little different, but that's how we do it in the state of Iowa. We want you to do that online as well. If an employee was already off on unemployment due to no child care prior to the FFCRA going into effect, can they opt to stay on unemployment rather than get the paid sick leave and paid FMLA? That's a tricky one. I don't know if I have the answer for that right now. Stephanie, I think I have you muted. I'm not sure she may know that. Stephanie Callahan's on with us as well from an attorney standpoint. I don't want to put her on the spot though at the last minute. I'll get back on this answer and let me find out on that one. So we've had a lot of questions come in, and we're running close to time here. And I want to not only our partners who have joined us on here today, I'm just going to do 2 more questions, and then we'll go ahead and go back and answer these. We'll shift the ones that go to our partner group to them, and then we'll make sure that we can get them addressed and out there. Does a county hospital need to reimburse 50% of the FPOC 600 weekly benefit? Yeah, so the $600 is not, you don't have to worry about that. That's paid directly out of the feds, and there's no reimbursing from the employer on that one. If an employee has to be off work due to a lack of childcare because of COVID-19 and school closures, is that individual eligible for unemployment? Yes, they are, and they would be eligible for the $600 as well. That was the second part. Please provide details on employer submission of VSW data. A school district is continuing to pay food service staff 100% of their pay for reduced hours, and they are, okay, this is a long one. I'm going to read this one, then we'll end on this one. A school district is continuing to pay food service staff 100% of their pay for reduced hours, and they are to be able and available. An employee has a doctor's note to excuse them due to a COVID-19 reason, so they are now eligible to choose unemployment. That would be correct. What is the district's responsibility to continue to pay if they aren't able and available? So they would be eligible for unemployment insurance. I think what you're asking is, what is the district's responsibility to continue to pay your staff? So they would be off on layoff. So depending on what your policy is, when somebody goes on layoff, typically they're not paid usually, unless they're like under the voluntary shared work program, where we have a dual thing there. But they would need to file for unemployment. If they have that excuse note, they certainly can. Okay, so on that note, we're coming into a close here. I want to thank everybody for being on. I know there's a lot more questions that are still, maybe we don't have too many more, I guess. Maybe one more. Molly, I think this is just the last one. Maybe I was reading this wrong. Does an employee count matter for unemployment for extended FMLA? It's 500 or less. Yeah, I'm not sure I know what that one means. Let me do some more deep diving on that one, and we'll take a look at it. So I think we've got Molly's helping me with the questions, for those of you who don't wonder who I'm keep referring to Molly as. When will we get our extra $600? Will we get $600 payments for the week of the 29th and this last Sunday? So we're hoping that money comes through next Friday, the 17th. That's the goal. And in theory, yeah, you'd get 2 weeks. That's correct. I believe that's how that's working. So good question. So I think that's actually all the questions. I'll end on that note. I got some homework I got to do here to respond to some of these others. William, I saw you just put a question, and I'll get the answer to that one sent back out to you. So I want to thank our guests for coming on. Thank you very much for following us on these webinars. This one obviously has been recorded. Thank you for my technical difficulties working through some of this. We'll get it posted to the website, and I'll get a copy to banking and credit union as well, so they can put it on their stuff if they will as well. So that's it, everybody. Thank you.